Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Fabrizio Romano here as always to keep you posted on the transfer market. Today guys, as usual, many news, many stories. We have to talk about several things because we are entering the next is going to be a really important week, but movements have already started. The World Cup is coming to an end, the final week ahead, and so we jump into it together. And we start immediately with the news. We start immediately with the latest, and let me start with here we go, because Ajax are not only working on a surprising deal to try sign Azzedine Unai, midfielder from Girona. I told you about the story yesterday. 25 million euros his release clause. Ajax have tried to negotiate under that price, but Ajax want Unai because he's a player well known by the coach Mikel, and Ajax have been trying for some time to find a midfielder who can be top elite midfielder. They tried for Dani Ceballos, but at the moment is not advancing, and now also Unai in their shortlist. But Ajax also get a very important striker, because the deal is done between Ajax and Al Hilal for Marcos Leonardo, and it's a here we go for 17.5 million euros. So this is the transfer fee. In Brazil, reports were about 25 million euros. My information is Ajax will pay 17.5 million euros for Marcos Leonardo, who said yes to all contract terms, is authorized to take his medical and sign his contract with Ajax, and so new striker for Ajax will be Marcos Leonardo, an excellent addition up front for Mikel and for the director Jordi Cruyff. Talking about the here we go, talking about the big updates, guys, I also want to mention some Turkish news, some Turkish updates. Let's start with Besiktas, because I told you over the week Besiktas will travel, will their management, will travel with their directors to meet with Leandro Trossard and his agent and present the project. Besiktas have an agreement done with Arsenal for Leandro Trossard. 18 million euros plus 2 in add-ons, so package of 20 million euros for Leandro Trossard to Besiktas. Then, now Besiktas need the final green light from the player. The meeting in the US was very positive. In terms of financials, Besiktas are offering what they want from player side. So the contract terms, the salary, everything is ready. 3-year contract plus 1-year option. What's needed now is the final yes from the player, who has to talk with his family, who has to talk with people close to him. Leaving London and going to Turkey is a big decision to do, and now Leandro Trossard waiting to give his final green light to the move. Besiktas are waiting. They believe that here we go is coming soon. And then Mason Greenwood, guys. On Mason Greenwood, Olympique Marseille have accepted all terms offered by Fenerbahce. So the agreement Olympique Marseille Fenerbahce for Mason Greenwood is also done. What happened today is that Olympique Marseille made sure Manchester United were informed about the agreement. Manchester United not only have a sell-on clause, but also have a buyback clause. So Man United technically could say, okay, we want the player back. We can match the offer and we want the player back. But this is not happening. Manchester United are not matching the offer. So now it's about fixing the final cost of the deal. When I mean final cost, is not the salary, not the length of the contract, but the extra cost of the deal on player side. And then it's expected also in this case the final green light from Greenwood in order to proceed with the here we go. So Mason Greenwood very close to Fenerbahce. Marseille gave the green light, now waiting for the final green light from the player and also from his camp in order to proceed with this one. So also Mason Greenwood, a big story of these hours, big story of these days. Then guys, many questions on the situation of Manzambi, because now Switzerland are out of the World Cup, and Johan Manzambi is for sure one of the most interesting talents we saw at the World Cup. He did fantastic. Then he was injured in the final games, but when he had the chance to play, he did really fantastic. On Manzambi, let me explain you the situation. Newcastle have an agreement in place with Freiburg, and it's been the case for some time. So it's already 5-6 days that Newcastle have agreed all terms with Freiburg for Johan Manzambi, for a transfer fee close to 60 million euros. So the package is ready. They were waiting for the player side to confirm the agreement. It's been few days and Newcastle are still waiting, for a final decision by Manzambi. Now, one of the clubs trying to call to understand the situation around Manzambi is, according to my information, Aston Villa. There have been 2-3 clubs from Premier League calling to understand the situation, if the deal was closed, if the deal was done, and at the moment still waiting to check on more. But Aston Villa are one of the clubs calling for Johan Manzambi. Aston Villa can offer Champions League football. Aston Villa need to replace Onana, who suffered a big injury during the World Cup with Belgium, and so Manzambi is one of the players Aston Villa are considering, but depending if Manzambi says yes or not to Newcastle. So let's wait also on this one. Newcastle remain in control, but they need the final green light from the player, and Aston Villa have been calling in the recent days. Then, guys, we have to talk also about Ederson, just quickly. Because on Ederson, I told you the deal has collapsed with Manchester United. The player left England. The player is now on holiday. So Ederson will now relax a bit after the World Cup, after the whole season he had with Atalanta. What's going to happen after that? My understanding is that Atalanta, from next week, will talk with the agents of the player, with the camp of the player, to offer him a new contract. So Atalanta not only are happy to have Ederson back because they believe he's a top midfielder and they believe the player is fit, but Atalanta are prepared to offer Ederson a new contract to show their trust in the player, despite Manchester United deciding to go against the deal a few days ago. So the position of Atalanta is, we want to keep Ederson and we offer him a new contract. Let's see, obviously, what's going to happen in this case with the player side, because he has 1 year left on his contract and he can have plenty of opportunities in the next months, eventually on a free or on very good conditions. And then, guys, let me close with some mentions to the Barcelona stories, because there are many questions on Barcelona. First point, Karim Adeyemi, Wednesday in Barcelona, medical test, contract signing, in 24 hours he will do everything, and so Barca have their new winger. It's not a surprise. Today Dortmund confirmed that the player is not joining the team, is not joining the preseason. Guys, the deal is done. 22 million euros, 7 in advance, sell-on clause. Adeyemi can be considered a new Barcelona player. On Ferran Torres, today the questions are, is true that Ferran to PSG, there is already an agreement, the deal is already done with Ferran? Guys, at this stage, I'm told that Ferran is talking, not Ferran himself, but his agents. So forget about Ferran himself, because Ferran is focused on the World Cup and nothing will happen while Spain are at the World Cup. So until Spain are there, semi-final now and eventually final, Ferran will not have any direct conversation. Then, after the World Cup, Paris Saint-Germain are talking to his agents, but the understanding is that more clubs have reached out to his agents, and the new contract at Barcelona is still something that the player is not considering as off. So it's going to be on Ferran, together with his agents, after the World Cup, to make a decision. On Biziou, Jesse Biziou, the winger from Bruges, the deal is at the final stages, is almost closed. There are still some few details to clarify. It will be in the next days. I expect Biziou to join Barcelona for sure, but there is still some detail to fix, and then it will be. And here we go. Also, this one exclusive story in the last video. You can find absolutely everything about that on YouTube. Here in the last video, I told you, keep an eye on Aston Villa, because they are very attentive to the situation of Johan Manzambi. It was out of nowhere. No one was talking about Aston Villa today, and now the story is everywhere, because Aston Villa are hijacking the move for Johan Manzambi from Freiburg to Newcastle. What happened? Basically, Newcastle and Freiburg had a verbal agreement on the transfer fee, 60 million euros. So club to club, it's been done for 3-4 days. But waiting on the player. Newcastle were waiting and waiting and waiting. The answer they were getting from the player and this agency was, we need to wait for the end of the World Cup for Switzerland in order for the player to commit, to make a final decision, to give a final green light to a move to Newcastle. To the club, to Newcastle, this kind of answer was already sounding as something strange. At the very beginning, they were really confident because they got the deal done with Freiburg. They wanted to plan for the medical, for the travel, contract signing. So Newcastle were preparing everything. And that's why the confidence was for here we go to be very close. But then Aston Villa started entering the deal. Aston Villa ready to match Newcastle proposal for him, for Johan Manzambi. Aston Villa are prepared to offer better money and Champions League football to the player, and now Aston Villa are close to reaching full agreement with all parties involved and bring Johan Manzambi to Villa Park next season under Unai Emery. So the Hijack is on the verge of being completed, also because the understanding a few minutes ago is that Newcastle are leaving the race. Newcastle are leaving because they believe that the player is not going to commit. They were waiting for an answer, but the player was taking his time, and so this story is not happening. In terms of future talents, of interesting talents, English player under 17 of the English national team, 16-year-old winger Kyran Thompson is a new Newcastle player. The deal has been agreed. He's coming from Arsenal Academy. Arsenal were trying to get a new contract done for Kyran Thompson. There was interest from several clubs in England and abroad, but deal agreed for Kyran Thompson as new Newcastle player. So they lose Manzambi, who is close to joining Aston Villa, but Kyran Thompson is now getting really close to the announcement, because deal is done, deal is agreed with Newcastle. In this case, there will be no surprise. Let's talk also about other situations, because I told you in the previous video, Leandro Trossard to Besiktas could be closed in the next few days. The deal is very close for Arsenal to get 20 million euros, 18 plus 2, and for Arsenal to for sure improve their team up front. That's the idea. If Trossard goes to Besiktas, Arsenal will immediately accelerate for a new winger. One of the names being mentioned internally, and Arsenal are in contact with his agents, is Christos Tzolis, the winger from Bruges. So Tzolis is keen on a move to Arsenal. There was another club trying to enter the race over the recent days, trying to understand if they can advance in negotiations to sign Tzolis from Club Bruges, but the answer arrived from the players' camp has been, we are waiting for Arsenal. And so Tzolis giving priority to the Gunners as a serious possibility to eventually replace Leandro Trossard. Then don't forget, guys, don't forget that Arsenal will still sign a top winger. With all respect, with Tzolis can be an interesting player with potential for future, but Arsenal want to sign a top winger, and the top name on their shortlist remains Morgan Rogers, because for Morgan Rogers there is everything already discussed and advanced on player side. So Arsenal made progress over the last month with Morgan Rogers in terms of contract, in terms of salary, in terms of personal terms, but there is still work to do with Aston Villa, who started 130 million pounds for Morgan Rogers, and Arsenal will try to understand if there is room for negotiation. They also appreciate Barcola, but for Barcola there is Liverpool as well, so it's going to be an interesting wingers summer. Talking about wingers, guys, a couple of things I wanted to clarify on different situations. We also have to spend a minute about Real Madrid. We have to talk about Real Madrid in general, wingers and in general. Wingers, Vinicius Junior. On Vinicius Junior, many questions. Let me clarify one thing. First of all, when I told you in the last video, Aurélien Tchouaméni already signed a new contract at Real Madrid, and there will be more players, one more player for sure, signing a new contract soon, I was not talking about Vinicius. Vinicius is a separate case, also because in the same video I told you about that story and I told you about Vinicius in a separate case. So if it was gonna be Vinicius, I was gonna mention Vinicius directly. In this case is another story. So Real Madrid are still working on another important extension, but I will tell them at the right moment. On Vinicius Junior, there will be discussions with his agents. Real Madrid want to clarify the situation this summer as soon as possible. I told you already 2 weeks ago about this, while Vinicius was already at the World Cup, was still at the World Cup with Brazil, and that remains the desire of the club. Real Madrid want to clarify the Vinicius contract situation this summer. Real Madrid don't want to arrive in November, December, January, February with Vinicius 1 year left on his contract. Media talks, paper talks, a situation that could be dangerous in terms of losing the player on a free. So Real Madrid don't want to enter into that kind of loop. Real Madrid want to clarify the situation as soon as possible. Want to clarify the situation in the next couple of weeks with Vinicius Jr. I told you that the desire of Vinicius is to stay and the desire of Real Madrid is to keep Vinicius. That's not new. I always told you this, with Florentino Perez pushing for Vinicius to be part of the Real Madrid project for long term. But it's important, really important, to mention there is a financial discussion. So now they need to find an agreement on the numbers, the contract, the salary. These things are important to understand, important to get. So that's the point. The salary is the crucial point of negotiation for Vinicius Jr. So contacts will continue. But the new contract I was mentioning that is going to happen for Real Madrid after Tchouaméni 2031 was not Vini. So I will tell you more on Vini as soon as it's clarified. On Real Madrid, just quickly, also a quick touch on Eduardo Camavinga, because my understanding is that Eduardo Camavinga, despite new calls coming from the Premier League, because Premier League clubs are very keen on Eduardo Camavinga, despite new calls from Premier League, Eduardo Camavinga still wants to fight for his place at Real Madrid. So now it's going to be important, because Camavinga will be with Mourinho, there will be the pre-season training sessions, so we have to understand how will be the feeling between Mourinho and Camavinga. The desire of Camavinga is to stay at Real Madrid. Then, if Real Madrid will tell him, you have to go, we will see what happens there. But at the moment, the desire of Camavinga is to fight for his place at Real Madrid. So this is Camavinga position. Just quickly, after the World Cup, Marcus Rashford, as soon as England return home, Marcus Rashford will be in direct conversations with Michael Carrick, but Rashford already confirmed his availability to start the pre-season at Manchester United. So the news I gave you 2 weeks ago is 100% confirmed. Rashford will start pre-season with Man United, and then, if there is a proposal on the table, Rashford and United will consider that. But Rashford will start the pre-season with Manchester United. So guys, on this and much more, I will keep you posted, as always, here on the channel every single day. Remember to like this video, to turn on the notification bell, subscribe to the channel for all the latest.